Tobler, who is the Director of Supplier Diversity at everyone's favorite store, Target. And welcome, Karen, and thank you so much for coming on to just share some knowledge with our women at NAWBO. I really appreciate it, and I will let you do your introduction.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you today, spending some time together. As Kim said, my name is Karen Tobler, and I'm the Director of Supplier Diversity at Target. I use she, her pronouns. And to tell you a little bit about me, I'm originally from Latin America, so I fondly say that I am Porteña, or from Buenos Aires, Argentina, by birth, and Uruguayan at heart, where my family is from. And I get the opportunity to lead the team at Target that focuses on the indirect side of the business, our owned brands, and our international program. We also have a sister team on the merchandising side of the business, and that's where I grew up initially in supplier diversity, was on the merch side. For national brand merchandise is what they focus on. So our conversation today is really one of my favorite topics. And before I get into that, I would love to get to know all of you too a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind utilizing the chat to help me get to know you a little bit better with your company name and the category that you're representing today.
Karen, what do you mean by category?
So if you are, let's say if you're a construction company, or if you have a product line, would love to know what your categories of focus are. Great question. All right. And so while you all are adding that information into the chat, I am going to just share a little bit more about what we're going to dig into today. And what I have is a number of tips and insights to ensure that your company can shine no matter what type of interaction you might have with a potential client. A lot of what I share today will be through that lens of potentially working with a Target or a mass retailer. But I think so much of what I share is really applicable to not only any potential client, but even your consumers as well. So I hope that it helps with your strategic planning, whether you are planning for pitches, meetings, any sort of strategic conversation that's coming up in your near future. And so take this time to do a little bit of self-reflection and think about what sort of actionable change you can incorporate into your business. And we'll have some time for questions as well at the end. All right, so I'm going to kick this off with good news. There are a ton of ways to maximize your opportunities for strategic conversations and connections. And so with that, there are so many ways, as you can see here by this slide. There are, industry trade shows across all different categories. We have supplier diversity teams like mine. There's pitch competitions, accelerator programs, chambers of commerce, referrals, local events, certification organizations, the list goes on. And so I'd love to know from all of you. Let's pick one thing perhaps that you've tried, if you're willing to share, of what has gotten you in front of a potential client that has gotten you noticed, where you've been able to jump into some level of a strategic conversation. And I'll give you a few minutes to think about that and throw it in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, I'm seeing referrals. Some conferences have been positive in terms of getting in front of a potential client. Niche communities, love that. Social media, great. Very cool. So participation in a video production, got a connection there. That's fantastic. So let's turn the table a little bit, and I'd love to understand from you all what's something that maybe was a little bit more of a challenge. Maybe it felt like it was a little bit of a struggle, or you didn't get the traction that you were hoping for. If you want to go ahead and throw that in the chat as well. Okay, so some of the supplier diversity context doesn't seem interested. That's a bummer to hear. Panel and keynote opportunities, roundtable discussions and networking events, applications for proposal, finding the right person, and overcoming the we already have someone issue. Yep. So follow-up can become exhausting without knowing what's in the pipeline. And then no acknowledgments from email attempts. Yes. So you've all listed a number of things that I would say are oftentimes frustrating, right? And so my goal today is to help you understand a little bit more of how to tweak some of those communication moments, to make sure that even if you can't get in right away, you have the tools in place so that you can continue over time by being strategically persistent, in a very respectful way, so that it can happen a little bit faster. And I'll touch on some of the concerns and some of the challenges, and hopefully can shed some light on that. All right. So after seeing all these different options, is it the question of building all the bridges, or is it just, hey, I'm overwhelmed? Sometimes it's a little bit of a mix of both. And so as we get into this, we'll talk a little bit about how to be strategic in connecting with procurement managers, with supplier diversity, with merchants, and other decision makers. And so at the heart of what I typically share during this conversation is that relationships are still key, and influence can come from anywhere. I think we saw that in the example of having a high-level leader participating in a video production opportunity. So I'm going to share right now a mantra that I say to myself when I have initial conversations with a potential partner. So, and my potential partners are all of the internal clients that I have, right? So just like you are maybe coming to me, or maybe coming to a business unit, or a sourcing manager or a merchant buyer, I have those same types of clients as well. And I always tell myself, whenever I'm pitching a company on their behalf, interest is what I am after. Interest is what you are after first and foremost, whether it's with me as a supplier diversity professional, whether it's procurement, whether it's with a business owner or a merchant. Because if you can get to that interest, the next conversation will follow, and so on. So how do we get started? So number one, I think one of the biggest pieces that you need to devote time for, or at least evaluate how much time I can do to devote to research, your outreach, as well as the actual strategic conversation. So in your research phase, being that we're a retailer, you might walk our stores to see how Target leverages or uses your services or goods, or you might connect with current suppliers for the retailer, especially in a community like this. There's oftentimes other suppliers that might currently be working with a retailer or a client that you're interested in spending time with. And so you can do some research there. And then you can also do some research on the retailer strategy or their corporate responsibility reports. And all of those things will start to give you some idea of their values, of what they're trying to solve for. Sometimes even finding out contact info through some of that research. All right, so for outreach, this is when you're connecting to inquire about setting up a meeting. I very much recommend not to reach out and expect to have a full conversation. No matter who it is, and yourselves included, I'm sure you're all super busy. Knowing entrepreneurs, my family owns business. I grew up in the entrepreneurial world. You're doing everything, right? And so you might not be able to reach that person at that right place and time or mindset. So just make sure that as you're doing that outreach, it's really to connect, to set up some dedicated time. And so that could be via phone, could be a quick email, it could be prior to a trade show or other industry events. You might do the outreach yourself, or you might have somebody within your own sphere of influence do like a warm introduction for you. That is always really beneficial. And then you get to the actual strategic conversation. So this could be an intro call, it could be a booth visit at a trade show. It could be a matchmaking session or a formal presentation or a follow-up. All of these activities take time and effort. And based on how you answer this question of how much time can I devote to this, you'll start to get a feel for what makes the most sense for you in order to get the best outcome, right? Are you the best person for each of these activities? Or do you need to delegate this out? And this may change over time. The more you do this ritual, because you have to do it every single time you're thinking about who you can reach out to for a potential client, the more you can fine tune it and make it easier to adjust for those potential clients. And I'm just going to look at the chat here really quick to just see if there's any other comments that I need to address before I move on. All right. That's a great call out of building potential guest list. All right. So one of the most important actions that you can take to prepare and get started to really understand that client and to be solutions driven is to think about things that resonate with that client. And I'll give you a quick example. Since Target is a mass retailer, especially if you're on the indirect side of the business and you're executing a service, and let's say you're executing a service that you need to provide when stores are open. Think about things like, are you equipped to do so when the store is open? Do you have experience in ensuring that there's minimal disruption to our guest? Another focus right now for Target is what's called Target Forward, which you can Google and find some information online. And that's a specific initiative that is around sustainability and many other areas that creates change that is good for the people and the planet. And so what types of solutions do you offer that could potentially pair well with this potential need? Now, for merchandise product, if there's any merch product suppliers on the call, walking the store is an incredible way of getting a firsthand look at what is important to the retailer. So I highly recommend doing this exercise. And here's a few things that I encourage you to do while you're there. So number one, where would you put your product? That gives you an idea of what kind of buyer that is and what other products they might be including in their overall category assortment, right? And so the other piece that you would want to look at is, how is that area merchandised? How are the products displayed? Are there carriers or shippers that they sit in? Are they pegged? Are they on shelves and there's no zip strips anywhere? So a lot of these things give you a hint as to what that merchandising strategy looks like. And that way you can adjust based on your goods that you're trying to sell. Because, for example, Target doesn't use zip strips where other mass retailers do. And so if that's the only way you package your product, that's going to be a very hard sell to a Target buyer. And then you can look at pricing and just in general, the competitive set, right? What are their offerings? How many SKUs might they have per brand? And then lastly, look at packaging. Is there a sense of uniformity in the styles? Is there a wide range of very different packaging? You might want to adjust accordingly depending on what's on the shelf, but first and foremost, make sure it stands out. And then let's see, share an approach for selling professional services as well. Yeah, so I would say again, you want to consider looking at not only our corporate responsibility reports. Most companies will have some sort of PR news platform where they share out a lot of the different initiatives that they're working on. And then with that too, I would say, getting to know other suppliers in the area that might be working on with that retailer in your category is always helpful as well, because they'll be able to share insights that you might not be able to get from some of our more public facing information. So, and then supplier diversity often can help too in terms of professional services where we can support with timelines or with just saying, hey, you know what, this is something we do in-house. So maybe we're not the right partner for you. So there's a lot of different ways to figure those things out. Asking good questions, I would say in general, is a good way to go. Great question. All right, so we talked a little bit about preparation, assessing solutions, and really being that go-to person for how to improve upon what is existing. So a major component of having lots of strategic conversation is that these conversations are bespoke. They're very tailored to who you are meeting in terms of your potential client. And so the amount of time that you devote really plays a role, and so does that potential business partner's need. Some decision makers just want to go very high level at the beginning. So you need to adjust for that. Some want to co-create with you. They might have ideas that they want to bounce off you, and then you can bounce off them. And so it's a very, partnership oriented conversation. And then some might want to do something completely different. So you have to arm yourself with different bullet points and different approaches to be prepared for any of these styles. And then there's others too. So when you communicate with your potential partners, I would always ask yourself, like, what do you want out of this meeting? Now, you might be looking at me right now through Zoom and saying, why are you having me ask myself this question? Like, it's obvious. I want to come away with a deal. I want to do some business. I want them to give me a contract. So this might be a little bit of tough news, but first and foremost, that cannot be the number one goal in that conversation. Because if it is 99% of the time, 90 to 99% of the time, you might end up disappointed. Most partners cannot go into a contract on their spot. They're usually fact finding. So when it happens that they're like, you know what, no, not at this time, you might feel like you either did something wrong, that the pitch was off, that you forgot to share something, or like that they, aren't interested. And it might not be the case at all. It is often the case that because they are fact finding, they are going to go through a pretty long series of analyses to try to understand what's needed within their category, and then also reach out to a number of other suppliers, including their existing suppliers, if it's something that they're currently utilizing, to identify who might be the potential finalists for that either RFP process or from a merchandise process, a line review or assortment review, as they're called. So those decisions require time and review. So the number one thing you want to walk away with is that interest. Like I mentioned before, I want to walk away with interest because that gets you to that next conversation. And these 4 elements will be that constant for you. So number one, be patient. I totally understand that sometimes it takes a few tries to get there. Whether your conversations via email, professional social media channels like LinkedIn, phone calls, in person, sometimes you have to repeat your story several times. And I know that can be frustrating. Don't get discouraged. I would say that oftentimes our decision makers are thinking about a million different variables. And so something might not quite align that first time, but it might later on. Something might just click later on that you mentioned to them that then connects all the dots for them. So again, I know it can be frustrating to have to repeat your story over and over again, but it's well worth it, because if you're doing it in the right way at the right alignment, you'll be able to get those clicks over time. And then being patient also means that you have to allow for that space, right? So, try not to over-engage. One thing that I've really appreciated over the years is when suppliers send me just a quick update quarterly email or bi-yearly email of saying, hey, here's how we've grown. Here's an award we've gotten. Here's a current client that has given us a really fantastic testimonial. That helps me take information back to those category managers to say, don't forget about this company in your next RFP, or don't forget about this company on the next line review. Look how much they've grown. Look what their added capabilities are. So that's a really great and respectful way to have a quick interaction with someone that you're connected with at a corporation that then can help them be that influencer for you. So again, influence comes from everywhere. So those types of quick moments are very helpful. Next, I would say, be thoughtful about when you're showing up. It might not make sense to connect in January if they aren't reviewing things until August. And then I would also say to avoid connecting on a professional level on a platform that maybe the buyer or a procurement partner uses for personal means. So I probably wouldn't outreach too often on Instagram or on Facebook unless it's something that you can tell is a professional profile. All right, then we want to be prepared. You know your business better than anyone. And so that should include your core competencies, your capacity, and your level of service. You should know whether you can execute everything in a timely fashion and what those thresholds actually look like, right? Because you can't do everything. So what can you service up to? And then I would also say that it's better to answer, that it's better to answer in those moments what you also can't do. If there's something that you have to draw on a line in the sand and say, you know what, we're not experts here. I can't stress enough how important that is and how much that's appreciated, because that's clarity. And clarity allows for, I think, better conversations and better partnership. All right. So next, I would say is be really impactful. As you think about how you share your message, your storytelling. You're bringing a decision maker on a journey. So make sure that you're leading with solutions and clear differentiators. Oftentimes, if you're looking at your testimonials, whether it's a service, a goods company, or a retail product company, your testimonials will show you where your company stands out and what those differentiators typically are. So don't be afraid to comb through that information and analyze it for themes of where you really stand out. And then last but not least, we're going to be well positioned. So know how you can best support that potential client and be super transparent about that is. Again, draw that line in the sand, what you can do, what you can't do, and make sure it makes sense for that potential client. I'll just give a quick merchandise scenario for you that when I had beauty and essentials as two of my categories in the past, and I would oftentimes be approached by very high-end luxury beauty brands. And while they were fabulous and wonderful, a mass retailer isn't always the best channel for those companies. And so make sure that you do your research as to what makes the most sense for your business. You know, mass retail might not be it, but there might be other clients that are right in your sweet spot. So it's okay to have to say no to potential clients because it might be harder and more challenging to do the work if it's not a good alignment strategically. All right. So we have our 4 constants for the conversations. Again, keep in mind, most potential decision makers can't do anything on the spot. They're fact finding. Goal is to get to the next conversation. And then you might have to pull from different mental bullet points to tailor it to your audience and to the moment. So let's jump in to the very first part of our journey, which is typically first contact. And this is quite frankly that quick professional statement, the elevator pitch, really quick way of conveying your unique brand pop proposition in a couple of sentences, probably 2 or 3, who you are, and maybe one stat or so to ensure that you're communicating why you're notable or credible. We'll dig into this a little bit more to fine tune our own professional statements in just a minute. But besides some of those basic considerations to include would be, you know, a specialty or a hero product, especially if you have a face-to-face. And you could consider even like adding an award. Don't do it all, but you want to pick just 1 or 2 of those things. And then let's take a second here I'm just going to look at the chat. How do you find approved suppliers? Will you remind me, Audra, of your question at the end? I want to make sure I get to that one later. Thank you so much for asking that. So one last thing that I will mention on that first contact is a really quick way that I utilize to understand what potential scale could be for a supplier that I'm interested in learning more about is your competitive set. So number 1 is your competitors, and then also who are your current clients? I get asked a lot if it's okay to mention a competitor, especially one if it's a direct competitor to Target. So Walmart typically or Amazon typically are the ones that I get the question of, is it okay to mention if I work with these 2 companies? And I would say absolutely yes. In most cases, it is. I would qualify that with unless you're under an NDA, or if there are other sensitivities within your contract where you're not allowed to have non-competes. Marketing is one area where oftentimes creative agencies are not allowed to have non-competes. So in those circumstances, you want to be a little bit more careful as to what your contract looks like and when you're reaching out, and for me too, right? I can't necessarily, I have to be careful with folks under contract to not be soliciting a contract. So there's always a few of those sensitivities. All right, so let's move into those professional statements. And I'm sure you all have a professional statement at this point. The reason why I wanted to share this with you is just to level set why this is important. And again, having been in the business for about 8+ years, having owned my own businesses, I think this is actually harder than we think it is. It takes some time to figure out, surprisingly, so that the statement can be really compelling in order to gain interest. A professional statement can be for you as an individual, or it can be for your company specifically. So I'm going to give you homework, and I'm happy to send this slide to Kim for distribution. So in order to build a compelling statement or fine tune what you already have, you need to incorporate what your company does, who is your actual audience, your differentiators, and what your clients walk away with in that statement. So here's a bit of a formula, and this is a simple one. So again, you're more than welcome, and I'll share this one as well with Kim. You're more than welcome to adjust this to your needs, but this is a very basic way of introducing yourself and keeping everything concise and to the point. And so you might have your own, like I said, that you've fine-tuned over the years. So if you do, I'd love to get a couple of examples shared out loud. And so in this case, it starts with a good old, my name is, so-and-so. I'm with this company, and we specialize in providing X, Y, and Z with our core services and offerings. And so you would be, specific as to what that is. And then our clients walk away with X due to our various differentiators and unique specialties, right? And then you can also consider having a closing statement of some kind to help pull in a conversation. It's like, how could I be of support based on what you've just learned? Or may I find time with you to learn about your goals and needs? Things like that really help to engage that partner and just show that level of respect and partnership that you're trying to create with them. So I'll share mine that I oftentimes use when I meet either a new supplier or when I'm connecting with others in the industry. So my name is Karin Tobler, and I'm part of the supplier diversity team. I specialize in guiding and connecting diverse suppliers at the right place and time to increase opportunities for business and ultimately continued success. As part of an award-winning team, I support diverse suppliers in shortening their learning curve and strategically plan their growth, thanks to my team's knowledge sharing approach, and dedication to relationship building. How can I be of support to you? All right. So that's first contact. And that statement is often coupled with what I call the trade show special. So this can definitely be a conversation that you actually utilize at a trade show. Or it can just be, if you had a little extra time, how do you add on to that professional statement? So in this case, with the trade show special, or that long story short, you want to think and talk in bullet points. Since you only have usually about 2 to 3 minutes, you want to take a little extra time to convey that why, your service, and your differentiators. Next, you might have a strategic conversation that's a little bit longer. Could be a matchmaker, or maybe you have a few extra minutes at a conference where you're sitting to lunch with someone. In this scenario, you want to ensure that you're not taking up the entire time for the conversation. So with matchmaking, oftentimes they're like 15 to 20 minutes long, so that goes fast. So you want to make sure that your content is only about 5 to 7 minutes so that you allow time for discussion. And so then once that gets going, you want to ensure that you have visuals. It could be something as simple as a piece of collateral, like a one-pager or a brochure, or it could be something that is online. I would say online, like that you can share on an iPad, or sometimes even your phone works great, or a laptop, because with so many of us being remote still, it's important for us to be able to get that information from you digitally as well. So that makes it easy and you don't have to carry paper. But that's very important in these one-on-one meetings. Samples as well, if you have samples as part of your business. Don't have to take everything, but just, focus on a hero product or a hero good if that's something that your business does. So again, with this one, important to keep it short and sweet, and always ask about next steps. So you had the time together, when else should we connect? What else might I follow up with? It's really important to understand how they prefer a follow-up and what else might be helpful for them as they evaluate your business. Okay, now we get to the proposal. And this is the to be or not to be conversation, right? This is the official pitch or your submission for consideration. Often it's about a 30-minute conversation, or sometimes it might only be through an RFP process. You might not actually get to present in person. So you have to be super prepared with this one. Be concise and compelling. Again, very tailored to the retailer. If you are presenting in person, they like you enough to listen. So it's really taking them through a journey with your pitch. Help them envision what it's like to work with you, but be concise. In this case, since you have about 30 minutes, and oftentimes I would say between Zoom or, in-person meetings, I feel like meetings tend to start late. So always give yourself some cushion
I
to
was like, hey,
allow for that time. So no more than 10 to 12 minutes of formal presentation, because again, you want that conversation. For indirect companies, I will say that it's really important to be consistent with what you've shared in your RFP, underscore those main messages. If you have anything that's in addition that you might not have been able to put into the RFP, you can certainly touch on that if it's relevant to the scope of work. For merchandise, you'll want to focus the most of that time on the assortment and your differentiators and how you add to the category. I can tell you that in both cases, sometimes the focus is elsewhere, or it's the focus becomes on, hey, how do we stack up to the competition? Or, hey, this is how we market our product. And you spend so much time on these ancillary things that you don't get into the really important parts, which is your services, your scale, your capabilities, and your product assortment for merch. So once you get to that post-award phase, this is about growing together. And so in this strategic conversation, your client, you're all in, you want to succeed, they want to succeed, both want to succeed together. And so as you have the opportunities to co-create at the right time about the next stage of business, you want to ensure that, again, you're prepared for those conversations. This might be, over the following year, after there's been that if it's a 1-year contract, it may be a different meeting altogether if you have touch bases throughout the time. But I would very much recommend that you get, a number of quarters, at least, 3 to 4 quarters of business under your belt, to make sure that you can have any expansion conversations. Oftentimes we get approached for expansion conversations before the service has even been provided. And so that is something that's really important to consider, is that you have to demonstrate that you have performed to the level or higher. And that takes a little bit of time. So, don't jump into expansion conversations before you've actually executed the business. All right, I'm just going to peek at the chat here since I see a few questions.
And Karin, let me know if you need my help with the chat. More than happy to step in.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
So we'll target post outsourced commodities in effort for transparency. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that that's really hard for us because strategies change so quickly, and there's times where we get in a pipeline of events and that shifts. And it might shift out a year, it might shift out a couple of years, it might shift out just a couple of months. And so it's very tricky to keep updated when we have so many RFPs and just needs. So that's typically why we don't. But we get weekly updates on changes. And so again, our team is usually pretty equipped since we sit in procurement, and then our sister team sits in merchandising to understand like what's changing. So that's a tough one, unfortunately, but we try to stay as up to date as possible on our end, just to make sure that we can quickly say, okay, this shifted now earlier, or this is a year out, to help just level set the expectations and share it as best as we can with those folks that are expecting something in the near future. And then an example RFP, no, unfortunately, we do not share that out publicly. But I will say that it's pretty standard in terms of, your basic contact information, your capabilities. Oftentimes it's specific to a scope of work. So they're usually tailored for the specific categories. Okay, so we're almost to the finish line here. So this is just a quick chart. I'm not going to go into much depth, but I think it's helpful to understand, within each of these different options, and these are the primary ones that we tend to utilize from a supplier diversity standpoint to connect with suppliers, as to, for you as a supplier, how much time investment is it? What is the cost? How much pre-planning do you have to do? Is there coaching and education available for you during some of these specific events? Again, I'm happy to share this slide with you all. And I'll just give an example with trade shows. These are, again, more of those earlier stage conversations. Cost and time vary greatly by show. Some are more accessible than others. And so, your pre-planning will vary accordingly. I think the great thing about larger trade shows is that the investment, although it might be higher, there's also more access to education specific to your categories. Oftentimes it's a much more targeted audience. So as you evaluate shows, think about, what is that show's specialty? How much visibility do you get with your registration besides the booth? So that's something to ask the organizers. And then, who's the audience? Is it industry professionals? Is it the public? Is it a mix? I think if it's a mix, oftentimes that's really intriguing, because you can also see like what's trending as what booths and what exhibitors get the most traction. So it's great research as well. One thing that I will share with, conferences and trade shows, your business card. If you have not already taken advantage of the real estate on your business card, especially on the back, make sure that you have a few bullet points of what your company does. I get some beautiful business cards, and it's great with the name and the phone number and a website. But sometimes I'm in a rush between meetings and I'm thinking about the person that I've met. I go and grab their business card, and it's like, shoot, is this the exact person I was thinking of? I'm not sure. If you were to put a little extra information on that card, it makes it so much easier for that potential client to keep you top of mind and, instantly remember you in that moment when they pick up your card. So food for thought. I think it's super helpful to, again, make it easy for potential partnership. And then the other piece that I want to make sure that I mention is following up. If a potential partner says, hey, email me your capability sheet, or let's chat in a few months, make sure you note that and you follow through the way they asked. You'd be amazed how many folks don't do this. So that alone is a big differentiator for you in building that relationship and then getting to more strategic conversations. Let's see, I'm just going to peek at the chat here. All right. Usual contract terms. So it really varies by category. So some categories are year terms, some are 3 or 5. And yes, I completely agree with you. That's what our team tries to do as often as possible, is share like, hey, we're out, 1 or 2 years or 3 years, whatever the case is. Because that, again, provides you clarity, right? So I can't speak for everyone else, but that's definitely what our team tries to do as often as we can. Sometimes, again, certain things aren't publicly shared, so we do have to balance that as well. But the more we can give clarity, we definitely try to. So that's a great point. Let's see, the back of my card is a mini with NAICS codes and certifications. NAICS codes are tough because we will not be able to remember them all. And I would say if you have more detail than just the NAICS codes, that's awesome. So, with keywords or, bullet points on what your offerings are, I would say keep that up. All right. And then the last piece that I'll touch on with this slide is, again, supplier diversity. I would say with our teams, and this is more broadly, I think we all serve as those internal ambassadors or advocates for diverse suppliers. We're a resource to learn about how to shorten the learning curve in working with that specific company. And so you can leverage us for those types of conversations. And I would say, again, you want to ask yourself, what do you want to get out of the conversation with a diverse supplier professional, or supplier diversity professional, excuse me? Do you need counsel? Do you need feedback? Do you need to understand what timing might look like, a better understanding of process? Again, your business, but how can you adjust accordingly to work with that potential client? And oftentimes supplier diversity is that safe space to have those questions answered, or just to talk things out. I've worked with companies from the very, very beginning where they've had just an idea, all the way through companies that have been, very established and everything in between. I might not be able to get to everyone, but I try to get to as many people as possible to help them manage their strategies a little bit better with a little more insights and clarity. Okay, and then last but not least, one experience makes that entire perception for a company. So if you've had, I'm just going to give you a real life example, right? Think about if you've ever had an unfortunate hotel experience, or if you've had a really, bad service at a restaurant. You might not ever go back to that hotel, or you might not ever go back to that restaurant. And so much like those circumstances, your professional presence, your company's perception, whether it's through your employees or interactions directly with you, if it's positive or negative, that directly impacts the client's experience. And so everyone in your company should be aware of this responsibility. We always represent something more than ourselves. And so if you don't already have some sort of training of some kind for employees, or even any sort of representation that you might have as to what your expectations are, I would highly recommend having, a relationship management training, or having one point of contact as that go-to for potential clients, and a code of conduct policy. It really can make or break relationships when things are negative, or when they're positive, right? So we always want to err on the side of that positive route. Okay, so network. I'm going to touch on this just kind of at a high level. I think one of the really great things about supplier diversity that I've seen over the years is that we're a very collaborative industry. I'm the chair for the retail industry group, and I can honestly say that every day we're connecting with each other. Like, who do you know in this space? I'm looking for this a supplier in this category. So there's a lot of conversation within supplier diversity, and also within your own networks, right? And it really is about not only who you know, but who they know. So leverage those opportunities, as certified companies, or soon to be certified companies. We're looking for companies like yours to either be able to connect you with our company or with others. I've had several suppliers that have come to me and said, hey, you know what? I don't think I'm ready for Target, but I think I'm ready for a regional program at Walgreens. Can you introduce me to those partners? Absolutely. So, take advantage of those networks. And if you're meeting within this community or within trade show communities, leverage each other and see who each other is working with, or who you're striving to work with, so that you can pull that knowledge base together. All right. And certification, I would say, is really important for my personal vantage point. When I've done research, or when I look for exhibitor lists, that's the first thing that I look at, is certification. So it definitely boosts your business presence and your ability to have a strategic conversation. I would say that it opens a lot of doors so that you can start to make those connections. Make sure that you are having those opportunities to make that information easily identifiable. So it could be on your business card, it could be on a website. I do a lot more research on websites than most people do, especially like our business unit decision makers. They might go on the website really quickly. I actually do a lot of investigative work. So I go to look through your entire homepage. I go to the About Us section. I often do other Google searches to see if I can find out more about the company. But not everyone does that. So make it easy for them. And then I would say also, when you're participating in networking events or trade shows or fairs, place some of the logos of where you're certified on your booth or on your collateral. I was just at the Private Label Manufacturers Association, and they had a pretty cool setup where we had, all the rows of all these amazing private label providers, and we discovered 30 of them as diverse owned, just because they had logos on their booth. So very helpful for us that are out looking for you all. Let's see. How do we compete with the big firms? I'm going to wait on that one too. Thank you for that question. We'll get back to it. All right, so I'm just going to quickly go through the supplier diversity process. So we receive a request. Sometimes we get them early, sometimes we get them tomorrow and they're expecting everything yesterday. And then we spend a lot of time doing that research. Like I mentioned, we go to our databases, we search, we do other external searches. We merge everything into one file for those companies that we've met with, that we've had relationships with in the past, that would still be of viable interest. And then we create a recommendation for our category partners. And then we send it all back to the original requester. Sometimes they have questions for us, or sometimes they send out an RFI for additional information or request an intro call. So contact information is super important when it comes to those databases, and keeping information up to date is critically important. So here's my other piece of homework for you. Here's just an example of how many companies come up during different searches. So as you can see from our target portal, we have, in some cases, over 1,000. When you add it all together, it's thousands of companies that we're potentially looking at to review. And so what you need to do then is stand out in a positive way. So at some point this week, I'd love for you to go into any sort of profile that you might have set up with either a certification organization or with other databases or portals. Pull up your profile, score it with the following rankings. Do you think it's a 5 out of 5? It's perfect, doesn't need any work, it stands out. Score it a 4 if you think it's good or could update it with new information. Number 3 would be average. Information's correct, but might be time to spruce it up so it stands out a little bit more. 2 would be it's okay, definitely needs work, it's outdated, probably would be missed in a search. And then score yourself a 1 if it's definitely outdated, and it might even stand out in a negative way. So for example, if you didn't complete fields, it might not stand out the way you want it to. So one tip that I would leave with you is that keep an Excel spreadsheet with all of the different databases that you have submitted to, so that you record where you actually have your information. And then I would also recommend that you have your standard responses to some of the basic questions, like your current clients, overview of your company, core competencies, so that if you have updates, you just have to update that Excel spreadsheet, and then you can copy and paste really easily into your databases, and you know exactly which ones they are, instead of having to type everything out every single time. All right, so I'm going to close by just saying, you're part of a really great group. Lean on each other, continue to leverage all that you learn together as a community. You don't come this far to only come this far. But be patient. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but definitely be ready for either. And I would say continue to be prepared, do your homework, and you'll always be a step ahead. Be impactful, be yourself, tell your company's story in its best light, and really demonstrate where your core competencies are that shine. And then be well positioned. It's about continuous progress, leveraging your partners along the way, whether it's a peer, decision maker, other industry professional, supplier diversity. Change is that constant. And so I would say that you're not alone. Keep going. And I really appreciate having you give me the opportunity to share this time with you. So I will go to the chat for the last couple questions. And if I have time for one more, I'm happy to take that. Copy of the slides. So I'll be sharing some of the slides with you. I can't share all of them, but I will definitely share some of the slides.
And we will have a recording of this just to be so you can always reference that.
Awesome. Let's see. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. I know, Audrey, you had one earlier. I'm just trying to find it. How do you find out the approved suppliers or vendors within your category? I'm curious. Great question. So actually, one of the things that I do when I'm researching suppliers is I actually will research press releases. And oftentimes when a company has created a contract with a large supplier, sometimes they'll send out press releases. So that's usually one of my go-to ways of finding that information out. And so especially if you know that they're a competitor of yours, or if you think that they might be working with someone that you're interested in working with, I would actually just type out their business name, target, and see what comes up, right? Or whatever client that you're interested in looking at. That's how I typically find competitors for suppliers who might not even be aware of who their supplier or competition is. And then the other thing too is that depending on your relationship with supplier diversity, and if they can share the information, sometimes we're able to share that with you directly. So I know from a marketing standpoint, we have an agency of record for our media, and that's Essence MediaCom. So if you're a media outlet, that's usually something that we do share with folks so that they can go directly to Essence MediaCom and work directly with them, since they deal with all of our media suppliers. So sometimes we're able to share. And then the other question that I have here are, how do we compete with the big firms? Big consulting firms also, how would I get to the retailer directly? So I think a couple of things come to play here. So it varies by category, right? So sometimes competing with the big firms is really looking at your scale and capacity. How much volume can you handle? So it's working towards that volume. I think in other aspects, to your comment about consulting firms, I think perhaps it's more around, is there a niche that you can service that a big consulting firm can't? That's one idea for you. Without knowing a lot about your business. I don't want to, answer something just ad hoc without and making a ton of assumptions, but I think that's where I've seen in the past companies that are not in those big consulting firms be able to make some inroads, because they're either addressing a very specific concern or have a specific solution that they offer that perhaps, a larger company that's needing support isn't able to find with a bigger consulting firm. I don't know if that's helpful or not. And then any plans for tier 2 spend goals? Vanessa, do you mind sharing a little bit more about what you mean?
Is it okay to just come off of?
Yeah.
Oh,
Hello.
so oftentimes, like Ford Motor Company, they require their primes to also report diversity spend goals. So I didn't see that as part of Target's plans of, taking your primes and making them also follow some spend initiatives. I didn't see that. I didn't know if that was part of your
so
program.
we do track tier 2 as well. And so that again varies by category as to how we manage the tier 2. And then contact information, I can just have Kim share that with you all, and then I can get you to the right folks on my team or on our sister team if you have further questions, and I'm happy to answer questions as well. Do we have time for anything else?
Yeah, any open questions? Anyone want to unmute? And if there's a question that you've been thinking about asking, Karin, your presentation was great. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. So with who we have left, are there any questions since we have Karin with us? And I know you all have unique businesses and some information applies and doesn't apply, but in Audra, is she still with us? She's not. I was going to ask her a question. So any lingering questions, Vanessa?
I had one. I saw, well, I'm doing this on behalf of a client. There's the Retail Accelerator Program. And I think that starts at like 500,000 is the threshold to join that, maybe. But I was wondering if there was like an accelerator program that you could put together for, some of the tier 2s that, just want a foot in the door, to be able to work with the primes, as you said. Not everybody is up to par to take on Target. So if there were some accelerator programs that, what I'm saying, can kind of help gear up from there.
Yeah. So can you specify though, like the Retail Accelerator 500,000, like 500,000 in revenue, or?
I think that's where it qualifies you to participate in that program.
Not that I'm aware of. So we have 2 on the retail side. So retail product side, we have 2 different types of accelerator programs. We have one called Forward Founders, and that's typically for very early stage companies. And then we have Target Takeoff, which is more for close to shelf or at shelf already. But I don't know. I've never heard that before, so don't quote me on that it's not or it is. But we do have those two for the retail side. On the indirect side, we do have our own mentor program. We're actually doing a little bit of a shift in terms of the content of that program for the coming year. And while it's not dedicated to tier 2, we have had categories, because it's by category that we do this mentor program, where we have had opportunities to connect suppliers to primes. So for example, in plumbing or in HVAC, we've been able to connect some folks to GCs. So we have been doing some of that work. But again, it's been category specific over the last couple of years. What are your categories? I know you said retail, but is there a specific category that you have in mind for that tier 2 opportunity?
I mean, me personally is business support and professional development, but I serve as a business development for other clients. So I have both in target.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a quick question, Karen. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Do you have an agency of record for creative and web agency?
Yeah, so we have many. And
Okay.
those, unfortunately, I'm not able to share publicly, but we have a pretty significant roster of both creative agencies, digital agencies, and just general marketing strategy agencies.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
I have a quick question for you, Karen.
Mhm.
So for trade shows, is
Yeah.
there a hub that women can go to source out trade shows when they occur?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the past, I have come across sites that do aggregate all of the different trade shows by date and location and a brief description of what they are. Oftentimes when I meet with suppliers, that is a question that I ask them as to which trade shows they might be attending. And then also conversely, when I meet with merchants, I ask them, or when I meet with procurement partners, I ask them where are they attending. And so that way I know to send my team and myself to the appropriate ones. So you can Google the information as to what trade shows are out there. I would say from a retail standpoint, I know that we have a presence at some of the construction trade shows in the past by either attending or exhibiting. We go to all of the certification industry trade shows and conferences. And then there's specific by category trade shows that we've attended in the past as well.
Okay. Good to know, because I was
if I can find the link, I'll send that to you.
Yeah, that would be great. And then I would segue into just even talking about business cards, because a lot of conferences I've been to lately, I've been myself conflicted on how to show up professionally. Do I have an actual, business card or the digital business cards? And I feel, most people are doing digital, but then you have the one person who asks for
it's a little of both.
Yes.
we do a little of both for sure.
Yeah. Perfect. Any other questions since we have Karen? Yes. So Karen had Vanessa, a conflict at our last conference. So we do have our 50th coming up in 2025. And so Karen, I will make sure you're there for sure, because it's NAWBO's turning 50. And so you can't miss our big birthday party. Yeah, so we would love to. And you have been involved with NAWBO Minnesota, the chapter there as well.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yes, I think you went to an Ignite, or
I've gone to a couple of them. They've been great. I really enjoyed them.
Yeah. Karen, so huge gratitude. You, just so you all know, I feel like Karen's been a great just partner for us. She's always willing to chat with me and have really intentional conversations. So I really appreciate it. And this is the first of more that we'll do for next year. And I would appreciate any feedback. And Karen, if there's any topics that you think, just from chatting with some of the women here, that you think would be beneficial for our next go around, would love to chat with you about that. But really, I want to thank you so very much for showing up and just pouring all this knowledge into our women today.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to meet everybody and spend some time with you all.
Yay.